Welcome back. We're on lesson 3 of Music for Dummies, and this time we're talking about chords. Lesson number 3, chords. So as always, we're going to remind you some of the things we've talked about as we get started. That lesson 1, we talked about notes and steps. Remember whole steps and half steps and what our notes were. And in lesson 2, we talked about scales. Today we're talking about chords. So again, in quick review of those notes, we learned the C, C sharp, D. We won't go all the way through there, but some had sharps and flats. Some did not, and you just had to memorize that like you did your numbers or your letters of your alphabet. We also learned in lesson 2 the scales or the rules or formulas. They're there, like whole step, half step, whole step, half step. That happened to be the major scale rule, if you recall. Right there was the major scale and the steps in it. And that was the main one we were wanting to focus on for now as beginners. So today, as we start chords, what is a chord? Well, a chord is when you play multiple notes together or in nearly the same time. There's different variations of that definition, but mainly we're talking about when you're playing notes at the same time together. That is a chord. So a very common chord is to take the 1 and the 3 and the 5 note of the scale you're in, and there you have your chord in that scale. And this will make sense. Hang with me. You know, it's a lot of numbers in math, isn't it, as you start learning how it works. But here we have the C major scale. Taking all the knowledge we've been building, that C major scale, we started on our C, and we did our whole step stuff and our half step. And remember, we found out we had these notes here. And the C major had all the white keys on the piano, no sharps or flats. So we've finally got our 8 notes, our octave of notes. And now with our knowledge of a chord, and a very common chord, if I want the C major chord, I'll take the 1 and the 3 and the 5 note out of that scale. And if I look there, I can see the 1, the first note in a C major is C, 3 is an E, and my 5th one is a G. So my notes in the chord, the C major chord, are C, E, and G by following yet another rule I've learned. So there we are. The C, the E, the 3rd note, and the 5th note makes that G. And then back to the C. You can even throw, if you've got enough fingers or the instrument you're playing, you can get as many of those in different octaves as possible and get them in the chords you're playing. So as another example, let's look over here. If I started on a G, or I started in the G major scale, and I follow my rules, whole step, half step, I get my notes in the G major scale, recall, and I had 1 sharp, remember, the F sharp, 1 black key on a piano in G major. And then if I take my 1 and my 3 and my 5 of the G major, I've got a G, a B, and a D. So that is a G major chord. I'm playing G, B, and D. So let's have a little closer look at this. Hopefully it's starting to sink in, but I know it can be overwhelming at first if this is new to you. Here's some hands-on. That same graphic of the C major, no sharps or flats, my C major, whole step, half step stuff, and my 1 and my 3 and my 5 are the notes in my C major, which ended up being C, E, and G, 1, 3, 5. And now let's analyze that on some instruments. Let's see it a little more in application. There is like a guitar keyboard or a keyboard. Notice C major, I have the C, the E, and the G keys depressed there, pushed down. That's a C major chord being played. If you were at a piano, hit those down, it would sound good. It'd be the C major chord. And here is the C major on a guitar. Now, this can be overwhelming if you're not a guitar player, but notice the strings on the guitar are from the highest one up towards the top of your chest there, the low E, then Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. Those are the strings on your guitar. Eddie ate dynamite. E-A-D, good by Eddie. And if we analyze this on the guitar, we're going to see they're claiming you don't play that. See that X? They're claiming you don't strike that, but it's an E. You actually could strike that string on the C major chord. Here's one they're definitely saying play though, and they're saying put your third finger on that, and look, if that's an A, and I go up a whole step to there, that would be a B, and they're saying hit here. Well, there's no B sharp. That's a C. So that's a C note. That makes sense. I'd be playing that C major. Well, here I am on a D string, and they're saying hold a second finger there, go up a whole step. Well, that's an E. Skip the D sharp. So I've got a C and an E. That's fitting, isn't it? And then here I am on the G string, and they're saying play it open. Don't even put a finger on that string. Well, now I've got a G. C, E, G. Look at this. This is the B string. Goodbye, Eddie. There's B. There's no B sharp, so I'm hitting a C right there. There's a C, and then another open E string. So you're seeing they're all C, E, Gs on that right there as we're analyzing C major chords on piano and guitar. So there we are, C, E, G, C, E. Every note they're telling us to hit is actually in the C major chord, the 1, 3, and 5 that we talked about. So now, hopefully, you realize as a good beginning guitar player especially, even those on keyboards and things, the logic behind the chords you're memorizing. That really all you're doing, if you're a guitar player, you learn how to put your fingers here. These are probably recognizable as you're starting to play. Look on the internet and see how to hold your fingers. You're just learning how to hold your fingers so that you're picking the 1, 3, 5 notes in those chords. That's all that's happening there. And if you analyzed each one of these and took the time, you'd find like in the A major, you're playing your A, and you're playing the third of that scale, and you're playing the fifth of that scale in every case. That's all that's happening as you memorize these chords. So just some other neat facts about chords. You can play the same chord many places on the guitar. You might see a guy jumping up and down, and he's playing sometimes the exact same chord. He's just maybe playing it on the 1st fret or the 12th fret or somewhere in between. Sometimes these are called facings. And as you grow, the more of those you learn, the better sound you can get, or variety, a little bit of variety as you play. But so you can play the same chords different places on the guitar. You just have to learn different fingerings. Another thing is there are variations of chords, like by adding another note, you'll get a variation. One common one's like a 7th. You'll be playing that normal C, for instance, and add the 7th note. And sometimes this is like a flatted 7th and things of that nature, but just be aware that as you start playing guitar, you'll be seeing C9, C7. Well, you're playing the main C major and then adding a 7th or a 9th or things of that nature. These are chords. So let's do a little example here of just a few things. We're getting closer to some application, not just knowledge. So let's do like a CFG here. We're going to play C, F, and G chords on a guitar. Once you memorize it, when you could do things like this. There's a C chord, the F, and we'll go back to that C major. Let's go to the G major now. Back to the F, the C. So all we did was C, F, and G chords that you know all about the scale and the notes and why, some of the logic behind them. You just have to memorize how to hold your fingers now. Let's do A, D, E here. Here's A, and we'll do a D and an E. A chord. We'll do a D. Back to an A. Let's do an E. D. So in hopefully the very next video, we'll start getting into why we picked those particular 3 together and things of that nature. And we'll start getting into scales. So this is looking at a scale real quick that taking the knowledge you have of some of that scale, we teach you a little bit on fingering, you'll be able to start doing things like this. That's just playing notes in a scale that I've memorized. So hopefully, keep sticking with us. We're going to start putting the pieces together that you've been learning.